Hi, and welcome back to the next lecture in How to Publish in the New Millennium. Dr. Chris Stout will be talking about marketing and sales in this lecture. So first of all, and I'll have a lot of tools for you as well too, but I have available a 15 tab set of different ways to track your marketing. There's a variety of different ways. Not all of these, don't be overwhelmed by this. There's a variety of ways to market your books once they're out there. We'll talk about those and deconstruct them, but it's also important to be able to keep things organized and be consistent. And maybe once you've done your first book, then you can template this and then rinse and repeat and use it for subsequent books. But just to give you a quick overview, I won't go into this right now. You can reach out to me and I can get a copy to you. But there's a variety of different kinds of areas to be able to look in for this, and we'll sort of take all these apart. But this will just serve as an outline, and then also something that you know that exists if you'd like to get your own copy. First thing is, let's take a look at Amazon bestsellers rank. There's New York Times bestseller, there is Amazon, there is Wall Street Journal, I'm sure Washington Post, etc. There's a variety of different kinds of places to be considered bestsellers, publishing houses bestsellers. I was very fortunate. You've heard me talk a lot about getting started in private practice. So that has been a good, long-standing, evergreen, if you will, kind of book for me with regard to being a bestseller. Way back when, even after it was out for a while, I don't know the date that I took this screenshot, but in terms of Amazon bestsellers rank for its category, it was number 11, which was really terrific to be in, practically the top 10. And it might have been in the top 10 at some other point. I just wasn't, kind of keeping an eye out for that at that point in time. So then the subsequent one that you guys know about, we've talked about before, the sequel to it, if you will, Getting Better at Private Practice. At that point, when that book came out, I was keeping track of things. And when it was published, about 3 or so weeks out, it was number 5 in its category. So I was tickled with that. So, and this gives you kind of the credibility to be able to say that it is you're a best-selling author, you're an Amazon best-selling author, etc. So once that happens to you, or if it, hopefully it will, and congratulations in advance. But once it does, then do screenshots and keep track of this, just in case someone says, well, what do you mean you're an Amazon bestseller? You don't appear to be. Books that become bestsellers aren't always bestsellers, so they don't stay on the bestseller list for forever, so or at the same ranking or anything like that, of course. So these are just kind of fun things in the future when you're giving this talk or talking about these kinds of things, that you'll be able to have those on hand to be able to make reference to. There's a lot of benefits. People say, well, of course, not just the ego part of it of being a bestseller, or maybe even the economics of it, which sometimes is good and sometimes not so much, not such a big deal, is there's a variety of different kinds of benefits of it. Once you're in that, take your victory lap, post on social media. 2004, when Getting Started in Private Practice was out, there really wasn't a whole lot of media to do those kinds of things about. So take advantage of that. You've worked hard. You've done a lot to be able to get that book out. It's appealing to people. People are enjoying it. So congratulations. That's a great thing, and you should be proud of that and let people know about it. But even more importantly, it's going to get started in Amazon. It's going to get recommended to people under the title "Customers who bought this item also bought." If you're familiar with Amazon, which I'm presuming most people are, that's a big deal. You see this oftentimes in not just books, but anything, Band-Aids, pencils, whatever you bought. A lot of other people also were interested in this. So that's nice. That's a nice little bit of free marketing for you to be able to get out under other people's noses that might otherwise have just stopped their search at whatever book they landed on, or just might not have found you otherwise. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows the exact algorithm that Amazon uses to recommend your books, but it does seem to be a connection with the ranking of your books. Also, not just ranking, but how many reviews you have and your number of sales. So they all kind of conspire together to be able to be beneficial. I don't know if one's better than the other, but all of those are very good things, obviously in and of themselves, but then they also help add to this. So the moral of this story is that as your ranking increases, Amazon will also promote your book, and they do that obviously for free without you necessarily having to do anything. Also being top ranked in Kindle, or which is obviously a proxy for Amazon as well. The key is to choose your categories wisely. And what does that mean? I'm going to step you through this process. So for example, this is not a book of mine that we'll give an example of, but basically if you can have changes for your bibliography. This obviously this is me, so you can how should I say this? It's good to have an Amazon authors page once you've got something authored. It doesn't have to be with Amazon. It can be with Wiley, or it can be with a general publishing house, etc. And once you're in there, then update it. You can put your image in it. We'll show that in just a second. But if you're selecting a book, look at what categories it's assigned to. And if you feel like it's miscategorized, then that's problematic, and you can contact them and let them know that there's an issue with it. I recently contacted Amazon for some quirky reason. One of my books had a book cover and title and author by a different person. I mean, it was like in thermodynamics or something. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even in my area of expertise or anything. And it took forever. It took 3 weeks to finally get that fixed, and it was just really kind of a huge pain. So anyway, if you go back to this and you're in Amazon Author Central, you select whatever the issue is. So you click on My Books. Then once you do that, you go down whichever book it is, and then you update the information about that book. And then you go down, these are all things that I've selected, and then you browse the categories, and then you say, what do you want to do in the categories? I want to update my books, browse categories. So clicking on this leads you to this option, which you take, leads you to this option, which you take, leads you to this option, which you take. Then this is the example that's not one of my books. So for example, in Kindle ebooks, let's say you're wanting to perhaps strategize about what are the best categories. So in Kindle ebooks, for brevity's sake, I picked these 4 areas of the book I'm going to show you an example of. So this person in Kindle ebooks was under this category, looked at the categories that their book might fit into, and looked at parenting and relationships. So obviously in nonfiction, you're pushing up against almost 1.5 million competitors. Now all of a sudden you're pushing up against 54,000, which is still a lot, but it's a lot better than 181,000 or 223,000 or anything up in the millions or whatever. So we click on parenting and adoption. Now that's thinned out that crowd of 54,000 down to 13, 2,000. 42, etc., etc. It's gotten smaller and smaller as we whittle it down. So this person that self-published a book, The Thin Wire, Mother's Journey Through Her Daughter's Whatever, has it for $0 on Kindle, people that are subscribers to Kindle Unlimited, or $3, so it's very inexpensive. But they then decided to have it be under family health. And this helped them become an Amazon bestseller because it was such a niche kind of market. There weren't a whole lot of books in there anyway. So whatever sales that you have, which might be a pittance if you're up against somebody or a category that's got 1.5 million versus some other category that's much, much smaller, can make a big difference in terms of your rankings and your ability to say that you're an Amazon bestseller. So when this author had done this is a description of the book that would have been in Kindle at 39,000, but number 1 in the Kindle store under Kindle ebooks, under nonfiction, parenting and relationships, and I think my image is probably blocking out whatever this one was, or number 19 in books, biographies, memoirs, true crime, and hoaxes and deceptions. So again, your book may not fit under all these or any of these kinds of categories, but in this instance, this person gave an example to be able to say, I was able to legitimately take the topic of the book that I had done and be able to fit it into this category, and that paid off for them. Again, it doesn't work. This is more as an example. It's not a recommendation, but this is one way that some people are able to, if you will, game or be strategic about how they can up their rankings. Obviously, I don't have a whole lot of choice in what Wiley books are and stuff like that, but for those of you where you do have some flexibility of it, or even more importantly, of fixing where there's a problem, like a bad book cover or something like that, there are these tools where you do have some kind of control that aren't just totally algorithm based. So One of the things to think about, another area in terms of promoting your book outside of Amazon or anything else, is to get what I call names to write your book. Or that'd be great if they wrote your book. Sorry, to write about your book. They can write your foreword, or they could write your afterword, or they can do the early praise that you saw with the Getting Started or get the Global Health book that I showed in a past lecture. It's really surprisingly not hard to ask people to do this. I've done this with APA presidents. I did it with the founder of the World Economic Forum. The only trick to it is just to ask. You might get no's. Not everybody that I ask responds or says yes, but for example, I had worked with Mehmet Oz through the World Economic Forum. He and I had done some projects on a project in Scotland together, so we knew each other. It wasn't like I was just contacting him out of the wild blue. And he was very kind enough to write the foreword to my books, The New Humanitarians, that was published by Prager. I also had Keith Ferrazzi from Ferrazzi Greenlight, also I knew through the World Economic Forum, write the afterword for that book too. So that was kind of a twofer with that one book. Klaus Schwab, who is an incredibly impressive fellow, who is the founder of the World Economic Forum, was very kind-hearted and wrote the foreword to my book, The Psychology of Terrorism, which was quite an honor. Mary, who was at the time the executive director of the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, was very kind to write the foreword for my book, The Evidence-Based Practice. And then friends of mine, Pat DeLeon, who is a former president of the American Psychological Association, and Bill Reed, who he and I had done some work together, a very well-known forensic psychiatrist, wrote support for the book, and those kind words of praise wound up on the back of the cover. So these are all done before, obviously, you finish the book or publish the book, so that it can be part of the book or on the book, so to speak, or in the inside flap. So hey, Oprah, Online One. You may believe that once your book is published that you can take that victory lap that I've talked about and sit back on your laurels and just wait. Your work is not done. Now it's a different level and different type of work, and it's really kind of only the beginning. There's a variety of ideas. You don't have to do all these. Obviously, the more you do, some will pay off, some won't, and it's an experiment. It depends upon your book, depends upon a variety of other variables, but these are just all ideas to consider. Use the ones that you think might work. Don't use the ones that you think aren't a good fit for what you're wanting to do. So just ideas. Participate in online forums about your book's subject. This can be Reddit and a variety of other areas like that. Ask your colleagues or your friends or people that blog about books if they'd review your book. Don't expect them to buy your book to do that. If you're asking them to do the favor, send them a copy of your book. It's particularly nice if you send them a hard copy of your book. With traditional publishers, you'll usually get a few of those, 6, 10, 15, depends upon the publisher. And you can take those and sign them, write a nice thank you note in the front matter, and just pay for the postage and send it off to them. Don't be chintzy about that. Other instances, people may just want it digitally, and you can send them a PDF. That's certainly fine. Create a mailing list. This can be obviously an email list that you could use with MailChimp or any other kinds of digital email management that have shown interest in your work perhaps in the past, or colleagues or people on listservs. Be careful with listservs because that could be seen as inappropriate or exploitative. I know within APA it's generally fine to announce that you have a new book out, but it's not so cool to continually announce it, every month or something like that. So one and done is probably the best advice for that. If you do create a email list and people are on it, invite them to be a part of it. I know I use MailChimp, and I know that gives you a link option where people can sign up for it if they want to be a part of it. And again, go to Amazon Central and create your author profile so people that do follow you can learn a little bit more about you and see what that's all about. Here's an example of mine of what it looks like. So this is frustrating. We'll talk about this in just a second with Googling yourself. But in Amazon, I am Chris E. Stout. There are other Chris Stouts that are publishing, that are authors. If you have a very common name, be sure to use your initial or other kind of way maybe to somehow distinguish yourself amongst others. And if it's kind of fun, it's an ego boost. You can have the choice of what your picture is. You can follow yourself, which is what I'm doing here. You can write your little brief biography about yourself and put that in here. Going across this, you don't have control over. These are the books. I don't know what their algorithm is why this one's here and this one's here and this one's here. But these are, and then it continues to scroll over to the right. You can't see it in this screenshot. But these are all books, that have been published by a variety. This is a Wiley book. This is a ABC Prager Cilio book. Wiley, Prager, self-published, etc. So they pull in, all the books that you have and what versions they are, etc. I have a podcast that I think I've mentioned here before, and I've got it connected. So every time I drop a new show, once it's connected once, it automatically populates here about author updates, which is fun. Or you can have other kinds of feeds that go in there as well. This will also then scroll down, which you can't see in this shot, but this book is listed here, links to that book, and then reviews and ratings, things like that of it. So this is really kind of fun. You do have some control over it in the sense of connecting your blog or other postings, writing your autobiography, a note, and then putting in a headshot. And then also, if they're missing books, you can tell them, hey, you're missing this book. You put in the ISBN, and usually within about 36 to 48 hours, that book then appears in there. They're very friendly. This is kind of a newer feature. I just kind of stumbled upon this more recently, but they do kind of the same things here. View all your books. You can look at your sales ranks. You can see your customer reviews, etc. So it's just kind of a fun place to go see. And to build out and make sure that everything on it is correct. That's how I found out I had the wrong, somebody had the wrong book cover for one of my books, and that was not cool. Oprah Online too. Hey, other kinds of getting out there into Oprah's club, so to speak. Join social media sites and groups within those sites that might be interested in your work. These might be topical kinds of things. I'm on a couple of groups within LinkedIn that are around developing practices and global health and nonprofits and things like that. Not every book fits into all those categories, but for the books that do fit in those categories, it's good to let those people know about it. Or maybe if you have a book and your book's been promoted on somebody else's podcast, there's a bunch of podcast sites and stuff out there. So take a look, see what's a good fit, apply to those if you have to get permission, or just join them and feel free. But again, don't carpet bomb them about those kinds of things. Feel free to put together a press release and issue press releases about your work. These again can be supported by MailChimp. They can be tweaked and put on listservs, not multiple times, but different listservs that you may be, like example, your state association, or if you're in divisions of APA and psychology. Don't make the press release promotional, however, just make it more so somebody that might be interested in learning more about it, maybe to buy it, but then also maybe a reporter to talk to you about your book or about what the work was you did to make that book happen, or maybe a producer that's looking for guests to have someone appear on a talk show or a podcast or whatever. I've been fortunate. I've been on Oprah, I've been on CNBC, I've been on a variety of different kinds of talk shows and even more podcasts. So there's a variety of things when you do these kinds of press releases where you might be out there. You can also get a paid service you can hire a PR company. I've never done that, but you can also, there's ones that are out there, PR Newswire. I get those since I run a podcast. PR Newswire will ping me sometimes with someone that has a new book, or PR companies, but I've never used them as a customer, but they do exist. They do a very nice job. That again might be something to Google and see if it's a good fit and worth the cost and gives you good value to take a look at. Also, APA, again, I'm psychology centric, but if you're a member of the American Psychological Association, they have a media referral services. So just be ready to define what your specific expertise is, and if the media comes to APA saying, hey, we want somebody that knows something about pediatric oncology, or knows about marital violence or PTSD or terrorism or whatever, then APA can refer you. That's a great endorsement when media does that. When someone needs something for a story, they want it quick, they want it from an expert, and they want to get it done because they've got 50 other things that they're working on simultaneously. If that happens, don't sit on it. Respond to a phone call or an email or whatever as quickly as possible. And here's example of what that looks like of the media referral service application form. So just go to APA, log in with your membership credentials, complete this or update it. Remember that you have it because certain things might change. Your phone might change, your address might change. If someone wants to do an in-studio interview with you, like in Chicago, if you're in Chicago, but then you move out of Chicago, then you don't want to waste people's time that you're not going to perhaps fly or whatever to try and get there to be on hand to be at the 5 o'clock news that day, which are things that I've actually done and can be fun but a little stress producing. So take a look at that. There's probably other media services out there as well that might be in the association if you're not a psychologist that you could be a part of. Your university probably also has that. I've seen that very often that universities will say, hey, if you do have something new out there, a new study, a new publication, a new book, a new journal article, let us know because we want to get that out to the media as well, too, which is wonderful. Also, take a look at Goodreads. You can you can create your own little library and stuff of stuff that you're reading, but you can also add your books just like you could with Amazon if there's something missing with a ISBN number or what have you, and get those books out there too, because a lot of people will use that and they'll use that as a reference to be able to find books that they might be interested in. Website marketing softcore. I talked about the new humanitarians. I showed you that before earlier. This was what it looked like on an earlier iteration on my not-for-profit website, Center for Global Initiatives. So it was a one page out of many that was there. People might stumble upon it. I have a good friend who put together this for her practice, the hardcore version. The URL was Essentials of Private Practice, so she bought the URL based upon the name of her book. And it was really, Holly's terrific, by the way, and one of the things she did was not just talk about her book, but all the stuff that's part of her book and all the things that she talks about in her book. And it gave her an opportunity to be able to publicize her services. So obviously here's the person that writes about the essentials of private practice, but then also who is this person, how she might help you streamline your practice, getting the book, the contents of the book, reviews of the books, interviews about the books. She's available for interviews about the books, etc. So once you've done something like this, it might also be not just a way to sell your book and have people, find out about you in publicity, but also be able to do speaking gigs, which you'll talk about in just a second. Social media, Pinterest. I'd never really thought about Pinterest, but this is an article about how to drive users, because some people are power users of Pinterest and really love Pinterest. So I created a library page for all the books that I published, or lectures or other things, collateral kinds of aspects related to books and publishing and presenting, because again, someone might find it here, someone might, you never know where someone's going to stumble upon your work. So being out there, and when we talk about Google, that'll become even more important. Some people, I haven't done this, but some people will create a Twitter persona on their book. So William Loban created this one for his book, The Glasgow Curse. So then you can use all sorts of ways about things related to your book and ways to be able to get that out there, which I thought was very clever and creative. It's not a good fit for me, and it's a little too much work for me with all the other outlets that I have in social media. I'm always perpetually perplexed by how Twitter works. John Norcross, a very terrific psychologist, produced this out here for his new self-help book and did that on LinkedIn. So again, great area, more for professional audiences. So if your book is in that area, then that's a good way to do it. And self-help certainly I think is in that as well. SlideShare, which I think was bought by LinkedIn. I have a setting for this to talk about this book that I self-published, and then people can click through on it and see a variety of promotional materials about it. There's about 9 pages, and it's all done in SlideShare, which was very easy to do, just uploading a PDF. I have a few websites that I manage, so this is maybe more along the softcore side of it, but I got DrChrisStout.com. It's more for my consulting kinds of work. Then I also have A Life in Full, which is much more broad-based, a variety of different kinds of other activities and areas. And within that, I have my podcast So I have all the episodes listed there and kind of a shout out to the guests and whatnots that have been on the podcast and who's on it and show notes and what have you. But then also, like I mentioned earlier, I've also devoted a page to it as well on why global health matters and closed down the separate URL site for it. I didn't want to let it go, but it was just as easy. It didn't cost anything extra to have one extra page to have it be in here. So I went ahead and did that. And then I've just gotten into this. This is Linktree. I think it's linktr.ee, something like that. Just Google Linktree. And this is what I use as my sigline. So I just have a very simple, elegant Linktree / DrChrisStout. I make it hypertext in my Gmail, so it just says something like resources, tools, and biography. And because I see some people that have siglines in their emails and Gmails that are like a million things. And I don't think that plays well as personal bias. I used to have some that had like, 2 items and 3 items and 5 items. And I thought after 5, it looks messy and weird. So this is just one single line, and it's a variety of different kinds of things. And I can tweak these. I can change the order of these. It's a freemium model, so you can get free versions or whatever. This version currently also has a thing supporting anti-racism activities. So if that's something that's important to you, you can have that be a part of it too. And it is, so it's part of mine. So highly recommend this, highly tweakable. Whatever you want to have in it, you can change them. You can change the order. You can change your sigline here, so to speak, or subtitle, screenshot or headshots, etc. So we talked about showing up in Author Central in different ways or whatever. Here's a little research I did, and I highly recommend. It's not just ego surfing, but do this for yourself. If you search for, when I searched for Chris Stout, I found this. So generally it was good. This is not me. This is Wikipedia. I do have a Wikipedia listing, but there's another guy, Chris Stout, who's a Scottish violin and fiddle player from Scotland. There's also me, who's Chris Stout, the psychologist, and there's also Chris Stout Hazard, who does a lot of social media stuff and things around building, et cetera, et cetera. So this, kind of, I sort of show up here if you get here, but basically you're getting Chris Stout Hazard and you're getting Chris Stout, the fiddle player. So then I tweaked it a little bit and I added what happens if I search for Chris E. Stout. So this time it's a bit better. So now you see Chris E. Stout, the Wikipedia listing is #1, and it actually is me. And then you see Amazon pulling it for my books and probably the Author Central stuff. I'm a LinkedIn influencer, so then that pulled. I got an award from APA, so that pulled from APA. I got an award from Purdue, so that pulled. So this is a good page. And it was just with a simple addition, although they got my age wrong. They added about 10 years to that, so that's not great. But anyway, and I have no idea exactly where that came from because I don't think it's Wikipedia. But so anyway, there may be some mysterious kinds of things that are kind of weird. And I probably, now I'm noticing this stage, claim this knowledge panel, so I should probably go back and do that. And then I also thought, well, while I'm at it, let's try Dr. Chris Stout. So I dropped the E, added the doctor, and that looked a little bit differently. It still had the Wikipedia page pull and the LinkedIn pull, so that's good because those are me. This is still me, and the age is still wrong. But then it also pulled Twitter, which I am active on it, because I just republish anything I do on LinkedIn also shows up on Twitter. But anyway, I thought that was interesting for something that I didn't really feel like I used a whole lot. It still had a lot of pull. So the moral of all this is, take a look out there when you start to name yourself or you start to get your email addresses, or if you want a website or a URL that's named after you or whatever, see what might already be taken, see what already pulls. If everything pulls correctly and fine, then you're in good shape. If you need to tweak a middle initial, or if you need to add a PhD after your name or a doctor in front of it, or whatever kinds of things that make sense, or maybe your full name, Chris Edward Stout or whatever, might make differences in terms of how you subsequently use any of the things that you do. Now let's talk about talks. We'll get a little meta here. Talks can be a great venue for sales of your books and awareness of your books. This was kind of an interesting lesson that I learned. So I gave a lot of talks at public libraries, and when I gave a talk at a public library, even though it's a public library, I got paid for it, which was really kind of cool. So I gave a set of talks all over the place around a variety of different kinds of topics. The terrorism books, the New Humanitarians, some stuff on climbing, etc. And it was fun. These are little posters that they made up. I didn't make these. The venues did that, and they would have a budget to have authors come out and speak. I had zero travel dollars because I was local, but these were all around the Chicago area. So that was all really kind of fun to do. do it. And the library would typically like buy one copy of your book, so it wasn't really to have sales to the library to buy it, but it was more for say like you got paid to give the talk, and maybe people that were there might want to copy themselves, and they could have the author sign it or something. So that's fun. I also have given talks at Barnes & Noble, which I always thought would be kind of fun. So I did this. They made this poster up, but I didn't get paid for it, because the whole idea with that was that I didn't get an honorarium for the talk, but they had my books available there on the shelves. So if someone came, they were interested in this topic, they liked what I had to say, then they would hopefully then go buy the book, which was the goal of that. So it's kind of interesting to think a public library pays you to go give a talk, and a commercial venue doesn't pay you to come give a talk. So just kind of think about that. Other venues to think about is colleges. Sorry about got a typo there. I'm just now noticing, but basically most universities have a place where they have a fee. There's like a student activity fee. So this was one, student activity fees at Loyola paid for me to get an honorarium and my colleague Joe to come that evening and give a talk, which was great fun. Also, organizations like Division 42 of APA, oftentimes at the annual convention will have times for published authors to bring their books in and be able to, with a little, square thing or a cash box, to be able to sell your books right then and there. There's also a variety of venues that could lead to opportunities, not necessarily selling your book, but talking about your topics. You can certainly possibly also sell your book or have people be aware your book is available on Amazon, what have you. But back in the day, I could give talks at schools and parent-teacher associations that would result in consultations and referrals for my clinical practice, which was child and family based. You may give talks at houses of worship, church. I've given talks at synagogues, etc. And those likewise can give you clinical referrals, and people that kind of want to have issues but maybe don't feel a little stigmatized or wondering, well, what's the psychologist all about or like? And then if they feel a good chemistry between your presentation, and then they might come up to you afterwards and talk to you about it. And then also professionally. I've given a ton of talks that are unpaid, do not sell books in the back of the room or anything like that, but they give me academic currency. They give me opportunities. I've talked about earlier lectures, being able to network with people, being able to make good contacts that I could work with or write with or have just nice, collegial relationships. There are areas to be able to test drive your ideas that might or might not turn into a paper or turn into a book, and they're just good ways to have professional growth. Giving any of these kinds of talks are also legitimate to put into your curriculum vitae that can be helpful with your academic rank and productivity and promotion. And then speaking engagements, just literally becoming kind of like a paid speaker. So think about this. Let's say you've been invited to speak for a paid presentation. Who is the audience? Is the audience paying, or is it just some kind of free thing that you're maybe giving a talk at a dinner or something like that? You still may, chances are, if someone's charging a fee, you should be charging a fee. If it's free, you still may want to charge a fee because there's other good reasons, depending upon the venue, as to why that would make sense. But also there's a variety of things. You're very flattered. You've been asked to come give a talk someplace, etc., etc. And again, this has already happened to you. It happens with great frequency after you at least have been out for a while. So you say, oh yes, I'd love to do that. Oh, well, we can pay you X number of dollars to do this. Oh, that's even greater. But let's say it's in California and you live in New York. Who's going to pay to get you there and back? Is it just going to be the travel of the airfare? Are you going to pay your own Uber? Are they going to pay for your meals while you're out there? Are they going to pay for your hotel? Do you make all the arrangements and pay for it in advance, or pay for it yourself and get reimbursed? Do they have a staff person whose total job is to manage speakers to come out? Do they pay you for your actual costs incurred? If it's $500 for your airfare and $300 for your hotel and $200 for your meals and $100 for your taxis, or do they just say, we will pay you your expenses at a per diem of $150 a day, and then you can make your own choices and be paid that and pay your own fees? Is there a deposit or a cancellation fee? Let's say you've blocked out 3 days of travel to go give this talk. So let's say you're clinical, and those are 3 days of clinical time that you've had to postpone that you could have made $3,000, let's arbitrarily say, or 2,000 or 1,000 or $1, whatever it might be. So that's lost income, and then you've booked for this thing, and then they come back and say, hey, we didn't get enough people sign up. We're really sorry, we have to cancel you, and now you can't rebook those patients. It's too late, etc. And now you've done this thing that would have been great and would have made good sense, and now you're actually out all those dollars. That's really kind of unfair to you. So how do you deal with that? Do you have a deposit, or do you have a cancellation fee? The time to think about all these things is not the time that you've been flattered and invited to come give a talk that you would actually like to go do. So basically, it's great to have a prepared agreement form. It gives clarity. Strong fences make for good neighbors. It gives clarity for both parties, you and the people that you want to give this talk to, that you're super clear on what's expected and what's to be delivered on both sides, your talk and your professionalism and their expense and their reimbursement, so that you don't wind up you losing money to be able to give something that you've been invited to do. So the best ways to do that is that I actually published this in the Getting Started book. So if you're interested in this, take a look at the Getting Started in Private Practice. It's a professional speaking agreement, and I won't go through it in detail here, but just to kind of show you, it explains all the stuff that I learned about that just made for huge, awkward, anxiety kinds of circumstances to teach me to say, hey, I need to ask about all this stuff in advance. The other nice benefit to this is if they say, well, oh, no, we're not paying your airfare. Oh, no, we're not paying, for your hotel, or, whatever, that you can say, well, I'm sorry, I can't afford, even if you're paying me $500 to come give this talk, if it's going to cost me $1,200 to get out there and back, and I'm going to lose income because I can't be treating patients and running my private practice, this economically doesn't make sense. I'd be honored, I'm flattered, it's terrific, but I'm just going to have to say no to that. So this is a very convenient professional way to be able to do this, so you don't look egocentric or mercenary or anything else, and it just gives great clarity so that you know what to expect. Who do I bill? Who do I send the bills to? Do I just pay all this myself? Do I do it in advance? Do I do it after, within a week, etc.? Huge, huge step saver, huge anxiety relieving agent. You can also then apply to places like world-class speakers and entertainers. I don't know if I meet the entertainer criteria. I seriously doubt that. My stand-up is pretty bad. But basically, you can join these kinds of organizations, and they'll publicize you. They get a piece of any bookings. It doesn't cost you anything to do this. You have control over these different kinds of areas. They can give you some advice in terms of what's good and what's been helpful. You can get categorized into different kinds of, if someone's searching for health or psychology or healthcare industry or blah, 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 blah. And then people can search for you, etc. So it's just sort of a nice way to get out there and be promotional. If you do get a gig booked through them, then they help manage all the process of that, and they get a small percentage of whatever your fees are with that. I also, on one of my websites, my nonprofit, post all of my talks and lectures, not all, but a number of my talks and lectures out there. And I also try to get copies of them, digital copies, and have them be on YouTube. So this just sort of is a place where they live. It's a kind of a one-stop shopping, easy way to get to them, but they're also out there on YouTube. So if you do get invited, or if you do apply for some place to be a speaker, someone might say, well, give me an example of some place that you've spoken or some interview that you've had, etc. It's nice to have those already on hand, maybe your top favorites or whatever, and you can send them off to whomever. And then I also have a YouTube channel for two reasons. One is for what we were just now talking about, but the other is to be able to publicly show all my different kinds of guests that I've had on my podcast. So some of these are guests, and some of these are talks where I've been the guest. So it's just sort of a YouTube channel that is out there that, again, it's one easy link that I can send to someone if they want to pick and choose and see a variety of different kinds of things. So it's develop and create once, and then be able to use in a variety of ways and use many. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but just it's important to have a promo kit and have it done in advance for those times when people come out and say, hey, can you send me one? Because a lot of publicity people will expect that you do have one, so it's nice to have one and not take 2 days to try and create, slap one together in a rush. So it's, I did this all myself. I just used a template. You can, I've got a section that's a nice pretty cover that you might have seen, the biography, Presentation ideas. This was to pitch the book for the New Humanitarians to libraries. And then again, the kind words also appear in there as well too, if they're not familiar with you or your work. I created a local sites database. I'd be happy to share if you're in the Chicago area. This might be helpful to you. But the template is just one. It's an Excel spreadsheet where you can just then you can have a large one for website addresses, etc. For this was universities and colleges, public libraries, etc. that I had spoken at, where they are, their website, the libraries, people that I had been in contact with, what cities they're in, etc. Email addresses, phone numbers, what have you. So it just makes it easier once you've done this once. You've got a new book out, or you've got something else that you want to have as a promotion to a variety of different kinds of areas, colleges, public libraries, etc. It just makes life easier. So hopefully, I know that's a whole lot to deal with, but there's a lot of tools packed into that. Our next one will be blogging, but our last lecture will be on those tools, where we'll take a little bit of a breath and be able to talk more about those and how they can be of help in your marketing and publishing and sales. Thanks, and until next time.